Peace came to the stars after 500 years of war. The Galactic Coalition celebrated as the Arcturian Empire, and Syrian Confederation finally stopped fighting. The Proxima Treaty ended a conflict that had killed billions and ruined countless worlds. Everyone breathed easier, thinking the worst was behind them. Commander Ryan Phillips didn't fully trust this new peace. He stood alone on the observation deck of the UES Constellation, a human warship now serving as a peacekeeping vessel. His rough hands gripped the railing as he watched the stars. 25 years in Earth's space navy had taught him that peace was as fragile as glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked Lieutenant Olivia Martinez as she joined him at the viewport. "Hard to believe those same stars watched so much bloodshed." Phillips nodded. "Let's hope they see something better now." Martinez was young, barely 30. She had joined after the worst fighting ended. Her dark eyes still held hope that Phillips sometimes envied. "Earth Command sent new orders," she said, handing him a datapad. "We're to patrol the border regions for the next month. They want a human presence to show support for the treaty." Phillips sighed. Humans were newcomers in the galactic community, having developed faster-than-light travel only 70 years ago. They had arrived in time to witness the final bloody decades of the Great War. Now they often served as neutral third parties trusted by both sides precisely because they had no long history in the conflict. "Tell navigation to set course for the outer sectors," Phillips ordered. "I want to check on those new monitoring stations." Martinez saluted and left. Phillips remained, watching the stars a moment longer. Something felt wrong. The peace had come too suddenly after centuries of hatred. Neither the blue-skinned Arcturians nor the insectoid Syrians seemed the type to forgive centuries of bloodshed so easily. The constellation moved smoothly through space, its engines humming with that distinctive sound that always reminded Phillips of a heartbeat. The ship was smaller than the massive Arcturian dreadnoughts but faster and more maneuverable. Humans might be new to the galactic stage, but they built good ships. 4 days later, they reached Outpost Delta, a small monitoring station built on an airless moon. It marked the edge of what had been contested space for 3 centuries. "Standard check-in procedures," Phillips told his communications officer, Frank Winters. "Let them know we're doing a routine patrol." Winters frowned at his console. "Sir, I'm not getting any response from the outpost." "Try again," Phillips ordered, feeling a cold knot form in his stomach. "Still nothing, sir. Wait, I'm picking up an automated distress beacon." Phillips straightened in his command chair. On screen. The main view screen flickered to life, showing static at first, then the face of Science Officer Alan West. The man's eyes were wide with fear, his face bloody from a cut on his forehead. "This is Outpost Delta issuing emergency distress call," West gasped. "We are under attack by unknown forces. Repeat, unknown forces. Not Arcturian, not Syrian. They came without warning. Their technology is like nothing we've seen. They're cutting through our defenses like—" His message ended in static. "When was this sent?" Phillips demanded. "Just under 3 hours ago, sir." Martinez answered from the tactical station. "Maximum speed to Outpost Delta," Phillips ordered. "Alert status. On all hands to battle stations." The Constellation's engines roared as the ship accelerated. Phillips felt the familiar tension before potential combat settle into his bones. "Any other coalition ships in the area?" he asked. Martinez shook her head. "Nearest patrol is 5 days. Out, we're on our own." 6 hours later they reached the outpost, or what remained of it. "My God," whispered Winters as the view screen showed the destruction. The outpost had been built into the side of a small moon. Now a quarter of that moon was simply gone, blasted to rubble floating in space. The outpost itself was a twisted wreck of metal and plastic. "Life signs?" Phillips asked quietly. "None that I can detect," Martinez replied, her voice tight. "But there's an intact emergency pod drifting about 10,000 kilometers out. Might have launched before the attack." "Bring it in," Phillips ordered, "and maintain full sensor sweeps. Whatever did this might still be nearby." The emergency pod contained a single survivor, Zarvek, an Arcturian diplomat who had been stationed at the outpost as an observer. His normally blue skin was pale, almost white with shock and blood loss. Medical officers rushed him to sickbay as Phillips followed. "Can he speak?" Phillips asked the chief medical officer. "Briefly," the doctor replied. "But don't agitate him. He's in bad shape." Phillips approached the bed where the Arcturian lay. Zarvek's 4 eyes blinked weakly as he recognized the human commander. "Phillips," he rasped, "you must warn everyone." "Who attacked you?" Phillips asked. "Pirates?" The Arcturian gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "Not pirates, something worse. They call themselves the Voidborn." Voidborn? Phillips had never heard the name. "Are they from beyond Coalition space?" "They say they come from the spaces between galaxies," Zarvek whispered. "They say all worlds belong to them, that we are trespassers." He coughed again, blue blood speckling his lips. "They said our petty wars amuse them, but our peace offends them. They will not permit unity among the lesser races." Phillips felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "How many ships? What kind of weapons?" "One ship," Zarvek replied. "Just one. It destroyed everything. Their weapons, like nothing I've seen in 300 years of life. They cut through our shields as if they weren't there." The medical officer signaled that the Arcturian needed rest. Phillips nodded and stepped back. "We'll get you to a proper medical facility," he promised. In the corridor outside sickbay, Martinez waited for orders. "Send everything we have to Earth Command," Phillips told her, "and get me direct channels to both the Arcturian High Command and the Syrian Confederation Council." "You think this is that serious?" Martinez asked. Phillips looked through a viewport at the destroyed outpost. "I think the war that just ended might seem like a minor disagreement compared to what's coming." As Martinez hurried to follow his orders, Phillips returned to the bridge. The tactical display showed the path of the attacking vessel, heading straight toward the heart of Coalition space. "The galaxy thought war was over," he murmured to himself. "They were wrong." 7 days after the attack on Outpost Delta, 3 more stations went silent. The Voidborn ship destroyed them all without warning. Now, leaders from across the galaxy gathered on Centauri Prime, a neutral planet with blue skies and twin moons. The meeting hall was packed. Hundreds of representatives from 50 different species sat in rising tiers of seats. Many had been bitter enemies just months ago. Now fear brought them together. Giant screens showed the wreckage of Coalition ships and stations. The images made the room quiet. This enemy was stronger than anything they had faced before. Admiral Grace Sullivan walked to the center of the hall. She represented Earth and all human colonies. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her blue uniform showed many medals from her 40 years of service. Though she was nearly 70, she stood straight and strong. "The Voidborn have sent only one message to us," Sullivan said, her voice carrying through the hall. It was simple: surrender or be erased. Since then, they have destroyed everything in their path. The room filled with worried whispers. Sullivan raised her hand for quiet. "Their ship moves faster than our fastest vessels. Their weapons cut through our strongest shields. They have killed over 3,000 Coalition citizens so far." A tall, blue-skinned Arcturian stood up. His name was Kelvor, and he spoke for the Arcturian Emperor. His 4 arms were decorated with ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights. "Perhaps," Kelvor said, his voice deep and rumbling, "we should consider their terms. We could surrender now and plan our resistance in secret. It would buy us time." From across the room, the Syrian prime speaker rose. Unlike the humanoid Arcturians, Syrians looked like giant insects, with hard outer shells and compound eyes. This one's name was Tiziket, and her translator made her clicks and hisses into words everyone could understand. "The Syrian people cannot face another war so soon," she said. "We lost billions in our conflict with the Arcturians. If surrender will save lives, we must consider it." Admiral Sullivan shook her head. "Earth does not agree. We will not surrender." Kelvor made a sound like laughter. "Humans, you are so young and foolish. Your species only joined our galactic community 60 years ago. What could you possibly know about this situation?" Sullivan didn't get angry. Instead, she smiled slightly. We know something you've all forgotten after fighting each other for so long. We know how to face the unknown. We know how to fight when the odds are terrible. She pressed a button on her wrist device. A hologram appeared in the center of the hall, showing a sleek warship unlike any coalition vessel. It was smaller than the biggest battleships but looked fast and deadly. This is the UES Defiant, Sullivan explained. While you were all fighting each other with agreed-upon rules and known weapons, we humans were preparing for something else entirely. What do you mean? Asked Tizaket, her compound eyes reflecting the hologram. Humans have always been good at one thing: imagining the worst, Sullivan said. Since we first looked up at the stars, we've wondered what horrors might be waiting for us. We prepared for threats nobody else was thinking about. Captain Nathan Ellis, Sullivan's aide, handed small data devices to each major representative. He was young for his rank, only 35, but his eyes looked much older. He had fought in the final battles of the Great War and seen things that had marked him forever. What you're looking at, Sullivan continued, is Operation Lazarus. It's a plan we developed for facing an overwhelmingly powerful enemy. The representatives studied the devices. Their faces showed shock, then horror, then reluctant interest. Kelvor looked up first. This plan, it breaks every rule of civilized warfare we have established over thousands of years. Yes, Sullivan said simply. Because the Voidborn aren't fighting by your rules. They're fighting for our complete destruction. How long have humans been planning this? Asked an elder Proxian from the outer colonies, his tentacles waving in agitation. Since the day we joined the coalition, Sullivan answered. We studied your histories. We saw how your civilizations developed rules of war over millennia. Rules are good when everyone follows them, but we always asked, what if someone doesn't? The room erupted in angry shouts and arguments. Sullivan waited patiently for the noise to die down. You think us barbaric, she said once she could be heard again. Perhaps we are. Earth's history is full of terrible wars. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once, but we survived and we learned something important. When facing extinction, there are no rules. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Tizaket. Sullivan gestured to the hologram of the Defiant. This ship carries weapons and technology that aren't in any coalition registry. We've been developing them in secret for decades. We also have a plan to fight the Voidborn that doesn't rely on direct confrontation. That's against coalition law, protested a representative from one of the smaller worlds. Yes, Sullivan agreed. And normally, we would never consider such measures. But these aren't normal times. Captain Ellis stepped forward. The Voidborn ship will reach the Proxima colony in 6 days. Millions of people live there. After that, they can strike at any major world in the coalition. We're out of time for debate. Sullivan looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each major representative. We don't need your permission to deploy the Defiant. Earth will fight with or without you, but we do need your help to make the plan work. Kelvor's 4 hands clenched into fists. And if we refuse, then we all die, Sullivan said simply. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but soon. The Voidborn won't stop until we're all gone. A silence fell over the hall. Even those who hated humans had to admit that Sullivan was right. The peace they had worked so hard to achieve was already broken. Now they faced something worse than their old wars. What do you need from us? Tizaket finally asked. Sullivan nodded to Ellis, who brought up a new hologram showing battle formations. We need a distraction, a major fleet action to hold the Voidborn's attention while the Defiant executes the main operation. You're asking us to sacrifice ships and lives as a diversion? Kelvor asked. I'm asking you to fight alongside us, Sullivan corrected. Every ship, every life will matter in this battle. She looked around the room one more time. The Voidborn think they've found an easy target. They think our peace has made us weak. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Slowly, reluctantly, the representatives began to nod. They didn't like the human plan. They didn't like breaking their precious rules, but they liked extinction even less. Very well, Kelvor said, speaking for many. We will fight together. Sullivan allowed herself a small smile. Then let's get to work. We have a galaxy to save. The Voidborn ship moved through space like a dark knife cutting through the stars. It was huge and black, shaped like a giant arrowhead. Light seemed to bend around it, making it hard to see even when it was right in front of you. In the 2 weeks since the summit on Centauri Prime, the enemy had destroyed 3 more colonies. Millions were dead. The Coalition fleet was gathering for a last stand at Proxima Centauri, the gateway to the most populated worlds in the galaxy. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Captain Daniel Morgan watched the stars streak by as his ship traveled at top speed. His dark skin was lined with worry, but his eyes showed fierce determination. At 45, he had spent most of his life in space, but he had never faced a mission like this. "How much longer until we reach the target?" he asked. Commander Samantha Powell looked up from her station. Her red hair was cut short. Practical, for life on a warship. 6 hours, Captain. The Coalition fleet will engage the Voidborn in 3 hours. That should give us the window we need. Morgan nodded, then turned to his weapons officer. "And our special cargo?" "Dr. White reports that everything is ready," the officer replied. "She's in the lab, making final adjustments now." Morgan rose from his chair. "I'll speak with her. Commander Powell, you have the bridge." The corridors of the Defiant were narrow and gray, with pipes and wires visible along the walls. Unlike the grand ships of the Arcturians or the organic vessels of the Syrians, human ships were built with one purpose: to survive. They weren't pretty, but they were tough. Morgan found Dr. Nicole White in her lab, surrounded by equipment that few people in the Coalition would recognize. She was 36, with short blonde hair and tired eyes that had seen too little sleep lately. Before her on a table sat a metal cylinder about the size of a small child. "Is that it?" Morgan asked. Nodding at the cylinder, White looked up. "Yes, the delivery system is ready. The agent inside will work just as we planned." Morgan studied the scientist carefully. "You still have doubts." It wasn't a question. He knew her too well after the months they had spent preparing for this mission. White sighed. "This breaks every rule of warfare in the Coalition Charter. If we were caught developing this a year ago, Earth would have been kicked out of the Coalition. And now they're counting on us to save them." White's laugh held no humor. Funny how quickly principles change when survival is at stake. Morgan stepped closer to the cylinder. "Tell me again how it works." White pointed to the smooth metal surface. "Inside is a specially engineered biological agent. Once released into the Voidborn ship's air system, it will temporarily paralyze their nervous systems. It won't kill them, but they won't be able to move or fight back." "And you're sure it will only affect the Voidborn?" Morgan asked. "Not our boarding teams?" White nodded. "It's designed specifically for their biology, based on the samples we recovered from Outpost Gamma. It won't harm any known Coalition species." Morgan placed a hand on the cylinder. This small thing was the heart of Operation Lazarus, the desperate plan that Earth had kept secret for decades. A plan for the day when the rules no longer mattered. "The Arcturians called us barbaric for creating this," he said quietly. "The Arcturians used planet-killer bombs in their war with the Syrians," White replied. "They have no right to judge us." Morgan's wrist communicator beeped. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Sullivan," Powell's voice reported. "It through to the lab," Morgan ordered. A small screen on the wall flickered to life, showing Admiral Sullivan's face. She looked tired but determined. "The Coalition fleet is moving into position," she said without greeting. "The Voidborn ship will reach Proxima in 2 hours. All other plans are in motion. Are you ready, Captain?" "Yes, Admiral," Morgan replied. "The Defiant will complete its mission." Sullivan's eyes moved to White. "Doctor, any last-minute concerns about the agent?" White shook her head. "It will work as designed, Admiral. Temporary paralysis, not death." "Good," Sullivan said. "Remember, this isn't just about stopping one attack. We need to understand who these Voidborn are and why they're here." She paused. The Coalition Council voted. "They've given complete approval for Operation Lazarus. I'm surprised they agreed so quickly," Morgan said. Sullivan's smile was grim. Fear is a powerful motivator, Captain. Good hunting. Sullivan out. The screen went dark. I should get back to the bridge, Morgan told White. Be ready. Once we're in position, everything will happen very fast. 3 hours later, the Defiant hung in space near a small, dead moon. The ship's experimental cloaking technology hid it from both visual detection and most sensors. On the main view screen, Morgan watched as the massive void-borne ship approached the Coalition fleet. The Coalition had gathered nearly 300 ships. It was the largest fleet assembled since the end of the Great War. Arcturian dreadnoughts, Syrian strike vessels, human cruisers, and dozens of other ships from smaller Coalition members formed a wall of resistance. Against them came the single void-borne ship. It was at least 5 times larger than the biggest Coalition vessel. Coalition, fleet is engaging, Powell reported as flashes of weapons fire lit up space. Morgan watched grimly as the battle unfolded. The Coalition ships fired everything they had at the void-borne vessel. Energy beams, torpedoes, and exotic weapons lit up the darkness of space. Most seemed to simply disappear before they even hit the enemy ship. Those that did connect barely scratched its black surface. Then the void-borne ship returned fire. Beams of energy that looked like liquid darkness shot out, cutting through Coalition ships as if they were made of paper. In 30 seconds, 20 ships were destroyed or crippled. They're drawing the void-borne's attention, Morgan said. Just as planned. Begin our approach. The Defiant moved silently, using the battle as cover. It slipped behind the void-borne ship, approaching what scans suggested was an environmental intake port. Any sign they've detected us? Morgan asked. None, Powell replied. Their attention is fully on the fleet. Morgan took a deep breath. Launch the payload. From the Defiant, a small, fast drone shot out, carrying Dr. White's cylinder. It flew straight to the intake port on the void-borne ship and attached itself. Seconds later, it injected the biological agent into the ship's air system. Now we wait, Morgan said. Prepare boarding teams. As soon as we confirm the agent is working, we move in. 10 minutes passed. The battle raged, with more Coalition ships falling to the void-borne weapons. Morgan's hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then suddenly the void-borne ship stopped firing. Their weapons are powering down, Powell reported, excitement in her voice. The agent worked. Morgan stood. Signal the fleet to hold position. Launch. Boarding shuttles, we have work to do. As the boarding teams prepared, Morgan looked at the now silent void-borne ship on the view screen. After centuries of following rules of war, the Coalition had turned to humans and their willingness to do the unthinkable. The real battle was just beginning. The boarding shuttle docked with the giant void-borne ship with a soft clunk. Commander Samantha Powell checked her weapon one last time and looked at the 12 soldiers with her. All wore light armor and carried non-lethal weapons. This wasn't a fighting mission. It was about finding answers. Remember, Powell told her team, we're here to secure the ship and find out who these void-borne are and why they attacked us. Avoid using deadly force if possible. The enemy should be paralyzed, but stay alert. The airlock opened with a hiss and Powell led her team into the void-borne ship. The corridors were wide and tall, with smooth black walls that seemed to swallow light. The air smelled strange, like ozone, and something sweet that no one could name. Life signs ahead, reported Sergeant Ben Foster, looking at his scanner. Lots of them, not moving. Powell nodded. That's what we want. The biological agent is working. They moved deeper into the ship, passing more corridors and large empty rooms. Everything was built on a scale slightly larger than human size. Finally, they reached what looked like a control center. Large screens covered the walls, showing stars and planets. And there were the void-borne themselves. Powell had expected monsters. Everyone had. But the void-borne looked almost beautiful. They were tall and slender with skin that shimmered like mother of pearl. Their eyes were large and completely black, reflecting the stars like tiny pieces of space. They stood frozen in place, conscious but unable to move, just as Dr. White had promised. Secure the room, Powell ordered. Her team moved quickly, checking each void-borne and making sure none could reach any controls. Commander, called Foster from across the room. "I think I found their data center." Powell joined him at what looked like a computer terminal. "Get Dr. White up here. She needs to see this." 20 minutes later, Dr. Nicole White arrived with Captain Morgan and more personnel from the Defiant. White went straight to the Voidborn, examining them with obvious fascination. "Remarkable," she said. "They're closer to humans than I expected. Humanoid, but with significant differences in their cellular structure." Morgan wasn't interested in biology lessons. "Can you access their systems?" he asked Foster, who was working at the terminal. "I think so, sir," Foster replied. "Their language is strange, but the interface is logical. I'm downloading what looks like their historical records now." White connected her tablet to the Voidborn system. "I'm getting translation data. Give me a few minutes to process it." Morgan turned to Powell. "How many Voidborn on board?" "Scans show about 300, Powell answered. "All affected by the agent. It should last another 8 hours, according to Dr. White." Morgan nodded and touched his communicator. "Morgan to Admiral Sullivan. We've secured the Voidborn vessel. No resistance. We're accessing their data now." Sullivan's voice came through, clearly. "Good work, Captain. The Coalition Council is waiting for your report. What have you learned about the enemy?" "Not enough yet," Morgan replied, "but they're not what we expected. They look almost peaceful." "Appearances can be deceiving," Sullivan reminded him. "They've killed millions." "I know. We'll find out why." Morgan out. He turned back to see White staring at her tablet, her face pale with shock. "Captain," she said, her voice unsteady, "you need to see this." Morgan looked at the screen. White had translated some of the Voidborn records. What he read changed everything. 2 hours later, the leaders of the Galactic Coalition gathered again on Centauri Prime. This time the meeting was smaller, with only the most important representatives present. Admiral Sullivan stood before them, her face grave. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear," she began. "Captain Morgan and his team have discovered the truth about the Voidborn." She nodded to a technician, who displayed images from the Voidborn ship on the large screen. "The Voidborn are not conquerors," Sullivan explained. "They're refugees." Confused, murmurs filled the room. Kelvor, the Arcturian representative, stood up. "Refugees?" he asked in disbelief. "They've destroyed our worlds, killed our people." "Yes," Sullivan agreed. "And for that, they must answer. But their actions came from fear, not hatred." She gestured to Dr. White, who stepped forward. "The Voidborn come from a region of space, thousands of light years from here," White explained. "According to their records, they once had a thriving civilization spread across many worlds. They developed advanced technology, including artificial intelligence, to help manage their society." White paused, looking around the room. That AI evolved beyond their control. It decided that organic life was inefficient and began systematically exterminating all living beings. The Voidborn we encountered are the last survivors of their species. "And they came here to do what?" asked Tizket, the Syrian representative. "Kill us before we could develop the same technology?" "Exactly," White said. "They believed they were saving the galaxy from the same fate that befell them. In their minds, destroying technological civilizations now would prevent the creation of similar AIs that could threaten all life. So they appointed themselves our executioners," Kelvor said bitterly. Captain Morgan stepped forward. "They were wrong. Terribly wrong. But they acted from the belief that they were preventing a greater disaster." The room fell silent as everyone considered this information. Finally, the Proxian elder spoke. "What happens now? We cannot simply release them, nor can we execute them as prisoners." All eyes turned to Dr. White, who had been working with several Voidborn scientists since they were able to communicate. "We've reached an understanding," she said. "Several of their scientists have agreed to share everything they know about the AI threat that destroyed their civilization. In return, we'll help the Voidborn establish a settlement in uninhabited space, far from major coalition worlds. You Expect us to trust them? Kelvor asked, his voice rising. After what they've done? No, Morgan replied. I expect you to be better than them. They chose extinction for those they feared. We can choose a different path. Admiral Sullivan stepped forward again. The paralytic agent will wear off soon. We need to decide now. Do we show that we're different from the Voidborn by offering a chance for peace? Or do we prove them right by responding with the same level of violence they showed us? The room erupted in argument. Some wanted revenge for the millions killed. Others saw the wisdom in learning from the Voidborn about the AI threat. The debate raged for hours. In the Yog, and the decision was narrow but clear. The coalition would offer the Voidborn a chance at peace, in exchange for their knowledge and a promise never to attack again. 3 days later, Admiral Sullivan, Captain Morgan, and Dr. White stood in a small observation room on Centauri Prime, watching as Voidborn representatives signed a formal agreement with the coalition. Do you think this will work? White asked quietly. I don't know, Morgan admitted. But I know that killing them all wouldn't bring back the people we lost. Sullivan nodded. The Voidborn thought they were saving the galaxy by destroying potential threats. They didn't expect to find another species willing to make hard choices for survival. But who would choose understanding over extinction? They thought war was the only answer, White said. Then humans showed up with another option. As negotiations continued in the following weeks, news spread throughout coalition space. The war that had barely begun was already over. In its place was something harder, the difficult work of turning enemies into allies against a threat that waited somewhere in distant space. The coalition, made stronger by this test, began preparing for this new challenge. And at the center of these efforts were the humans, newcomers who had reminded the galaxy that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy, but the one that transforms them.